Coming up this week on Outdoor Magazine, we head back to Kansas to bow hunt big whitetails with Ed Barton of B&C Kansas Hunts. Then a conversation with the man behind one of today's most innovative bow companies. Plus, more wild game cooking tips from Chef Dixie Dave Miner. Glad you're with us.
Spent the last 3 hours looking for this bird.
I'm excited. The dogs are pumped, and they're more than excited to go.
This isn't even considered a trophy fish out here.
And I kept thinking, any minute there's going to be a buck coming through here. Any minute.
All of a sudden, he stepped right out in the wide open, and I made my shot.
Some bear, another bear, will be back in here before too long.
This, I believe, is a personal best for me.
I just shot the biggest buck of my life.
Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Jay's Sporting Goods, the Dow Chemical Company, Ameristep, the Outdoor Magazine radio show and podcast, Darton Archery, and by Dixie Dave's Wild Game Soups.
Welcome to another edition of the Outdoor Magazine radio show. Glad to have you along with us this weekend. And I need to tell you about an Outdoor Magazine television show I'm working on right now. This one in the great state of Kansas. I'm heading out there to hunt with Ed Barton of B&C Kansas Hunts. This is a hunt I always look forward to. Of course, Kansas known for big bucks, and I've seen big bucks there every year, taken a few nice bucks over the years as well. And I love hunting with Ed.
Right now we're running about 16,000 acres, all kinds of ground, timber, high grass, draws, bow hunts. We're running bow hunts, muzzleloader, rifle. Bow hunting is my specialty, so pretty much the size of it, other than ready to kill some deer.
Well, it's our first afternoon here in Kansas hunting with Ed Barton of B&C Kansas Hunts. It's about 73 degrees as we head out to the stand this afternoon. A little bit warm, but I don't think it's going to cause any problems. It's the second week in November. I don't see how we can have anything but lots of deer action. We're going to go out, put our camera arm up, hang another stand, and we'll have a nice long sit tonight. And I tell you, I don't want to jinx this, but I'm feeling pretty good about this hunt. Now, let me tell you about this setup. We're in a 16-foot ladder stand. We're just into the woods about 20 yards. We're overlooking a CRP field to the north. We are overlooking a bedding area on top of the hill to the east of us. South of us, as we go up the hill, it's pretty thick country, and I understand there's some grass over the hill and a bedding area there. Below us to the west, a real thick bottom. This looks like big buck country.
Well, we're set up and ready to go. It's pretty tight back here. We are on the edge of a CRP. Just a little field, not very big, but all around us, it's thick. Something happens back here, it's gonna be up close and personal. And the buck's gonna be on us before we know it.
So the first night, we're in a tree stand. A little windy, a little warm, but we did see a buck. Right off the bat, in fact, about 4:15, a little spike comes wandering in. Of course, not a shooter, but I thought, if we're seeing a buck this early, it's going to be a good night.
Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine is brought to you in part by the Hunter Safety System. Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine is brought to you in part by the Outdoor Magazine radio show and podcast.
Kansas, big country, big buck sign, and big bucks.
Look at the tines on that buck right there, man. B&C Kansas hunts. Ed Barton, he's got the deer, man. We take care of business here, that's for sure. We had 2 other bucks come in this morning, and this one came into about 20 yards, turned around and walked directly away. I had one little shot and I took it, and man.
With bucks like that around and the pictures Ed captured on his trail cams, I was pretty excited about this hunt. So we go out there the next morning, the first morning of our hunt, and just as it starts to get light, I start to rattle. I hit the rattle bag. You never know in Kansas what's going to happen when you hit the rattle bag. In this case, that first morning, nothing happened. We didn't see an animal. We sat there till mid-morning and went back and got lunch. Still, it was way too early to be discouraged. On this trip, I've got my Darton 3800 compound in my hand. I've been hunting with a Darton Serpent crossbow the last few hunts. This time I grabbed the Darton 3800. I feel very comfortable with this bow. I've been a Darton guy for a long time. The first bow I ever shot was a Darton SL50. And recently I had the chance to talk with Rex Darlington, the man behind the SL50 years ago and the new 3800 today. I talked with him at Jay's Sporting Goods about Darton and the evolution of the company.
This is an SL50. This is the bow that pretty much put Darton on the map. It doesn't seem like I can go any place where people don't come up to me telling me about how they've had an SL50 or currently are shooting an SL50. And the next thing I tell them is about time they look at some of our new product. You see that things have changed a lot because it doesn't even resemble the bows we make today. Well, it was fast, considered fast at the time, and it was easy to shoot with it. It was one of the few bows on the market that when you would put a stabilizer on it and put an arrow on it, they both pointed in the same direction. And that's what we call a true center shot bow. And now every bow's made that way, but at that time that was an extra feature. Well, this is, I guess you'd say, the latest and greatest from Darton. And it certainly doesn't bear much resemblance to the early SL50, except, I mean, you still have wheels, you still have a riser, you still have limbs. But that's about as far as it goes. Everything has changed. The SL50, you know, if it was shooting 180 feet per second, that was considered pretty good. This bow will shoot about 350 feet per second, so huge difference.
It was interesting to see my old SL50, the very first bow I ever owned, the very first bow I ever killed a deer with, to see Rex Darlington, the man behind Darton Archery, holding this bow and looking at it, and then to put that down to pick up a brand new 3800 and compare these two. I tell you what, if you're shooting one of the big name bows of today, there's a good chance somewhere in that bow you are shooting Darton technology.
If you're looking for a high performance bow, you've got to compare to Darton. I think if you compare, we're going to come out on top. Don't just look at the advertising and listen to what people are saying. You compare and make up your mind yourself.
So after seeing nothing, that first morning we go back to the same stand. We sit there all afternoon again. It's windy, it's warm. We didn't see a thing. We sat the entire first day in Kansas, the full day, and never saw an animal. In some places, if you sat all day and didn't see an animal, you think, you know what? It's time to move. There must not be any bucks around here. But with Ed's Farms, we know they've been scouted. We know he has animals on trail cams. If you don't see anything, it just means you've got to sit a little longer because I believe it's going to happen. The second morning of our hunt, this is November 9th, a day that I just absolutely love. I've shot more bucks on November 9th than any other day of the year. Again, get out there first thing in the morning. As soon as we get camera light, we can see that it's windy once again. It feels like it's going to be pretty warm again. I hit the rattle bag. Well, it wasn't too long after that, we saw a buck coming in from the north. We couldn't see what he was at first. Then we got to look at him as he got closer. A small buck, a little 1.5-year-old buck. But the fact that he was coming into a rattling bag was pretty encouraging. And the funny thing about that buck is every time he'd start to lose interest, I'd hit him with my grunt call and it would bring him right back. Eventually, we brought him right back into the woods with us. Now, as I'm watching this little buck out in front of us, we notice another little buck coming in from the right. We rattled in 2 little bucks that morning. They ended up sparring with each other. Now, we couldn't get it on tape because they were just into the woods, but we could hear them. They got in there, they started pushing each other around, and they started, those 2 little 1.5-year-old bucks started going at it. You knew something was in the air. When the little bucks are going at it, the big bucks aren't going to be far behind.
Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine is brought to you in part by the Martin family of dealerships. Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine is brought to you in part by Carbon Express.
Now, this season here on the Outdoor Magazine show, you've seen Chef Dixie Dave Miner in a series of short wild game cooking tips. Now, we've got just a couple of more shows left in this series. We're going to kind of put it all together. This week, part 1 of Dave doing a complete recipe, and next week we'll wrap it all up.
Now, some great wild game wisdom from Chef Dixie Dave Miner.
So what we'll do, have a little bit of our mushrooms, stir that around a little bit. We have our bordelaise sauce that we make that we'll be using in a while. Here's what I talked about with the flambe. Put your alcohol in. See how that? This is your friend. I have no hood above me here. See, when this flames die down, that means that we have, the alcohol is gone. Now, just the essence remains, the harshness is gone. So we have our brown sauce, our bordelaise in there right now. We'll add our diced tomatoes. We're gonna stir this around and we're gonna lower the temperature and let it simmer for just a little while. This is some of the finest meat in the world. It's natural, all natural, basically organic, most of it. So treat it with the respect that these animals deserve.
It's the afternoon now of November 9th. We're back in the stand, the same stand we've been in for the last couple of days. Things feel like they're starting to get going. We rattled in those 2 small bucks this morning, saw another one, jumped a buck on the way in, he was up and moving around. It's still real warm though. All I got is just a t-shirt on under my scent lock. We put some scent down. I put some buck fever pre-post rut in those HME scent dispensers. Sprayed some BF gland all over the place just to get some scent in here. And I'm sure when the wind dies down, I'll do some rattling too, just to see if we can't get something going. You just knew that things were about to bust wide open, but we knew we needed a break in the weather. It's mid-70s, high 70s, it's warm, it's windy. What we needed that second week in November was the wind direction to change. It had been blowing out of the south real hard for the last 2 days. We needed the wind direction to change, and we needed the temperature to drop, and if that was going to happen, we knew the bucks would turn on. That night, down deep in the bottom, in the thick stuff, just before dark, we see an animal. It looked like a lone animal at first. We thought, hey, here could be our buck. Turns out it wasn't. It was a big, beautiful doe and a couple of fawns. We watched those animals till just about dark. They wandered on through, and it was time for us to call it a night. Now, I was ready to change stands until we rattled those 2 little bucks in. I felt that that was a good sign, that there were obviously deer in the area. We just needed to sit it out. So we did. We sat in that stand a 3rd morning. By now, it's November 10th, the morning of November 10th. We get out there bright and early, well before sunrise. As the sun's coming up, you can see it's going to be another windy day. You can see it in the trees. You can feel the wind blowing. And I wondered, okay, is this going to be a repeat of the other days? Or is this going to be something special? Now, I've got to tell you about this spot we were set up in. It was tight. very tight. I told you we were overlooking a CRP field on the north side, but everything else was real tight. And I knew in this stand, if we were going to see something, it was going to happen fast, it was going to be up close and personal, and that buck was going to be right on top of us. So we're sitting in the tree and hadn't seen an animal all morning. And by now I'm starting to get, I don't want to say dejected or frustrated, not at all. But you know, your mind starts to think, okay, is it time to move? Should we be doing something different? What are we doing wrong? And even though I knew that that we weren't doing anything wrong, it was just a matter of the weather needed to turn and cooperate with us. So it's getting to be 9:15 or so. We're going to sit for another 45 minutes. I'd taken my face mask off. I'd taken my gloves off. I'm just sitting there kind of enjoying the world, enjoying the scenery, zoning out a little bit. And I hear my son James say, "Shooter, shooter, shooter." I look out in the field in front of us, in the CRP field, because that's where I'm expecting to see this buck come from. Nothing. I stand up and I look. James is looking behind me over his shoulder. So I turn around. As I get turned around, I see the buck. He's 15 yards away. I knew because James had already seen him, he was a shooter buck. I got a glimpse of the big left side of his rack. I said, okay, I verify he is a shooter. But he's moving. At this point, he's 15 yards. He's angling away. He's not running. He doesn't have his nose to the ground, but he's at a pretty brisk walk. I managed to get standing up, to reach down, grab my bow, put the release on. By now, he's about 20 yards. He gets out to about 25 yards. I get drawn. He's about ready to step into the woods. It's now or never. He's at a pretty steep angle, quartered away. I grunt him, and he stops. He turns back to look at me, gives me a split second to make a shot. I let the arrow go. Oh, beautiful. It hit exactly where I wanted it to.
Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine is brought to you in part by Buck Fever Synthetic Scents. Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine is brought to you in part by the Outdoor Magazine radio show and podcast.
We're in Kansas this week, bow hunting with Ed Barton of B&C Kansas Hunts.
Roll it. What do you want? Yeah. Look.
Well, it's 11:15 now, 2 hours since we shot that buck. And the reason we backed out, we went over to check the blood, and we got good blood, a good start of it. But the reason we backed out is that buck was quartered away from me at a pretty good angle. And so I had to put the arrow behind, at least it felt like it was behind his last rib, up into the far shoulder. I feel like it's a real good hit. But a big-bodied animal, maybe one lung, we didn't want to push him. So we're back here now. We're going to get on the trail. Ed's here with us, his right-hand man, Steve. They've got the mule. And let's go see what we can find. Here's my Carbon Express Maxima Hunter. We knew it was going to break off here eventually. Lighted knock still lit. Good blood. He should open up here now. Should get easier. Right on the ground. Here's good blood here. Right here, here, all through here. Here's blood, blood, blood. There he is. I knew he was down. I knew he was. I was a little bit nervous at first when we didn't have great blood, but I knew I had a good hit on him. And good equipment. The Darton 3800 throws a fast arrow. Carbon Express F15 expandable. I've killed many animals with that head now and never had a problem. So, you know, good equipment's important when you're bow hunting, of course, but I got to tell you, I think the biggest thanks in this hunt goes to Ed Barton of B&C Kansas Hunts. Ed had a triple bypass just a few weeks ago, and I thought there was a good chance our hunt wasn't going to happen. But he's a pretty tough guy, and he said, no, come on out, let's do it. So I've hunted with Ed several years now, and every year I've either taken a nice buck or seen nice bucks. So if you're looking for a great hunt here in Kansas, especially a bow hunt, Ed Barton, B&C Kansas Hunts. Can't recommend him enough. And of course, as always, the ultimate thanks to God for putting this animal in front of me and for making that arrow fly exactly like I wanted it to.
Closed captioning of Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by the Dow Chemical Company. Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Jay's Sporting Goods, the Dow Chemical Company, Ameristep, the Outdoor Magazine radio show and podcast, Darton Archery, and by Dixie Dave's Wild Game Soups.
Thanks for watching the Outdoor Magazine television show. I also want to encourage you to check us out on the web. The Facebook page is facebook.com/Outdoor Magazine. It's an easy one, facebook.com/Outdoor Magazine. I'd also like to encourage you to check out the Outdoor Magazine radio show. You can hear it on broadcast stations across Michigan and as a podcast everywhere else. You can hear Outdoor Magazine radio on iTunes, on the Outdoor Magazine Facebook page, the website as well. We even have a couple of Outdoor Magazine radio apps for your Android or Apple phone to make it easy for you to listen anytime, anywhere. For details on those, check out the website, outdoormagazine.tv. That's outdoormagazine.tv.